Hey, welcome to the virtual Midrash. You are with the Way Congregation. I'm your host, Dr. Douglas Hamp. Looking forward to yet another amazing passage in Scripture. Today we are looking at VaYachel. This is and he assembled. All right, so this is where God tells Moses to get the people together so he can give them further instructions. And it's one of these passages that you look at and you're like, this looks like a lot of technical kind of stuff. And yeah, it is, to be fair. But here's the cool part. There's some very important lessons in this text. And as always, I'm really excited to be getting into this with you guys. All right. So let's just get here. We'll get the English and the Hebrew. All right. There we go. So then Moses gathered all the congregation of the children of Israel. Vayachel, Vayachel Moshe et kol adat b'nei Israel vayomer aleichem. Right. So he gathered all of the congregation or the Edah. Now, in Greek, that is the synagogue, right? So that's where we get that term in synagogue. There's another word which is from this word yakhel, which is kehila. All right, so a kehila is a gathering or a congregation. Is another way to an assembly, right? So there's these two different words that float around, and guess what the Greek translation of that is? Ready? Ecclesia. Okay. So this is where we get these two basic words, and we see them both being used for the children of Israel. That gives you a lot of insight as to what was happening in ancient times, and the whole idea of the church, so to speak, right? This idea of a new thing called the church is really well, it's misleading. Okay. Now, I was a uh, dyed of the wool dispensationalist most of my life. All right. And I always heard that there are the Jews on this side and there's the church over here. Never the twain shall meet. Right. You got two different things going on. And yet, I discovered, there, it's something different. Now, I've talked about this a lot of times in my teaching, which is the Commonwealth of Israel. Okay. So I want to go back to that. I think it deserves to be said again and again and probably again. Okay. Oops, not 22. There we go. All right. So Ephesians 2. Therefore, remember that you, once Gentiles in the flesh, were called uncircumcision, that at that time you were without Christ, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. But now, in Christ Jesus, you were once far off. In other words, you Gentiles have been brought near by the blood of Christ. And what? You're no longer part of the common, you're no longer part of the Gentiles, right? Again, you once Gentiles in the flesh, you were without Christ, but now, okay, but now, right? Because you were aliens from the commonwealth, but now in Christ, guess what? You're not. Now in Christ, what are you? He tells us, now therefore you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens, right? Citizens of what? Of the Commonwealth of Israel. That is what is so exciting about this. Right now, again, you can check out my book, Commonwealth Theology Essentials. I wrote that with three other guys, and we all came to this understanding in our own time, our own ways, our own space. But we all came to the same basic conclusion that we are now part of the Commonwealth of Israel. That means that you, if you are a follower of Christ, you're part of this nation called Israel. Now, doesn't make me Jewish. Okay? I want you to understand that. And I want you to know it doesn't give you the right to fly over to modern state of Israel and say, let me in, okay, because it's not going to happen. So just giving you a heads up there. But as far as we're talking about the age to come, we're talking about what my true citizenship is. I am part of Israel. Why is this important? You may say, but Doug, it doesn't really matter. I believe in Messiah and I believe, and that I'm going to be saved from my sins. And hey, hallelujah, that's awesome. Good stuff, right? But when we start talking about what does it look like to be a follower of Messiah, of Yeshua, what does that look like, right? Because he is my ultimate example. What he did, I want to do. It's that simple, right? What he did, I wanna do. Nothing more, nothing less. What he did, I do. That's my MO, okay? So, this is gonna come into play when we start talking about things like keeping the Sabbath. And where are we gonna talk about keeping the Sabbath? Well, you guessed it. We're gonna talk about that right here in the text. Let's go back to that in Exodus 35. Okay, so these are the words that the Lord has commanded you to do. Work shall be done for 6 days, but the seventh day shall be a holy day for you, a Sabbath rest to the Lord. Whoever does any work on it shall be put to death. You shall kindle no fire throughout your dwellings on the Sabbath day. All right, now this is where the church, by and large, and I use that term in the very modern sense, the very colloquial sense of the word church, right? This is what most Christians have been taught is that, that the commandments, all that stuff was done away with. It's not for us. It doesn't mean that they're all godless. I'm not saying that. But for many of them, there is this sense that, well, none of that stuff applies to me anymore. Right. But we're going to see that if we're part of the Commonwealth of Israel, well, then it does apply to me. Right. So this applies to me. And that's really where we're going is this applies to me. Work should be done 6 days, but the seventh day shall be a holy day for you, a Sabbath of rest to the Lord. The word there is Shabbat. Right? What day did God call Shabbat? The seventh day, not the first day, not Sunday in English, but El Sábado, right? The Sabbath, right? In Spanish, it's El Sábado, right? So that is the name of the day, and that's what it is, okay? So it's the seventh day that God has commanded us to rest from what? Working well? Yes, but we need to define what is working. We've talked about this before. If this is your first time joining me, then I will review it for you. The word here, okay, it says kol, all, haose, who does, o, melecha, right? So it really it's well better than the original Hebrew. Somebody wrote to me the other day, said, "Do you recommend a Bible that has a Hebrew translation?" And I kinda chuckled because there is no Hebrew translation. There is Hebrew. Hebrew is the original. Everything else is a translation. But Hebrew is the original, and that's why we go back to it, right? So, um, this word here, "melacha," right? What does it mean? Let's take a look at it, right? Occupation, work, or business. Occupation. That's what we're talking about, right? So we're not just talking about anything that requires any kind of, effort or work, energy, right? If you kind of take the scientific approach, work is anything that requires energy, right? So, turning on light switches, that's work, okay? You know, I don't know, rolling over in bed, it could be work. I don't know what. There's all kinds of stuff, right? Hitting the button for an elevator, some people consider to be work, right? I think it's ridiculous. I love those people, but again, I think they're completely missing the point. God is telling us not to do our vocation. Don't do your vocation on the Sabbath. Okay, so if your vocation is a bricklayer, then don't lay bricks on the Sabbath. If your vocation is, I don't know, man, how many vocations are there? There's lots of vocations, right? But don't work on the Sabbath. That is the day that God has given us to stop from our vocations. Okay, now again, there are some vocations that require, 24/7, and I think many of those, I'm so happy that we have them, right? So I think that's a whole different issue. But so many jobs you don't need to do. Now, you shall kindle no fire throughout your dwelling. Again, this is where our well-intentioned um, Jewish brothers, many of them, have come up with some rather peculiar interpretations of this. Okay, so why would you kindle a fire? So think about it. You are in the wilderness. It's pretty hot there. All right, it's pretty hot in the desert. Thankfully, God was giving them a cloud by day, so there you had some air conditioning. And at night, guess what? It does get chilly. But what did He give them? He gave them a fire by night. So you're not really in need of fire for warmth. Do you need it for cooking? Well, maybe, but you also have manna falling from the sky. Okay, so God's providing their every need. They didn't need fire to get the generator going so they could have water because God was providing them water. So what did they really need fire for? Well, for their work, okay, for any kind of metal smithing would have required work. I suppose, preparing the hides of animals to use for clothes and shoes and, whatever else they might have used that for. Well, that required fire, okay? Uh, certainly cooking would require fire, but you know, God gave them pretty much everything they needed. So it was fire that was used for work, and that's specifically what we see in verse 2. Don't do your vocation. Okay, so the fire is related to the vocation. It's not just a random no fire, sorry. So let's think about it. Let's say that you are a good, pious Jew and you live in Siberia. What do you do? Does this mean you can't have a fire? This is, let's say before electricity. You can't have a fire because it's the Sabbath day, or it went out at night, and now what do? Sorry, we just have to sit here freezing and cold, all huddled. And there's grandmother over there. She's 95, and if she gets too cold, she might die. Is that just the way it's going to be? Or the little baby? Little baby is freezing, but sorry, baby. God told us we couldn't have any fires today, and it's too bad that we live up here in Siberia. No, again, missing the point. And this is why Jesus came. He said, "Look, the Sabbath was made for you, not you for it." Right? You're not a servant to the Sabbath. The Sabbath is a servant to you. So that's the difference. God is just saying, "Look, take your day off. Don't do fire stuff." Okay, but he's not saying, freeze your butt off or no light for you or sorry, you could make soup and warm yourself, but nope, not today. He's not saying that, right? So this is where we have to understand that the bigger context of really what's going on. All right, and Moses said to all the congregation of the children of Israel, saying, "This is a thing which the Lord commanded, saying, Take from among you an offering to the Lord. Whoever is of a willing heart, let him bring it as an offering to the Lord: gold, silver, bronze, blue, purple, scarlet thread, fine linen, and goat's hair, ram skins, dyed red, badger skins, and acacia wood, oil for the light, spices for the anointing oil, and for the sweet incense, onyx stones, and stones to be set in the ephod and in the breastplate. All who are gifted artisans shall come and make all that the Lord has commanded: the tabernacle, its tent, its coverings, its clasps, its boards, its bars, its pillars, and its sockets, the ark and its poles, the mercy seat, the veil of the covering, and the table, and its poles, and its utensils, and showbread, also the lampstand for the light, its utensils, its lamps, and the oil for the light, the incense altar, its poles, the anointing oil, the sweet incense, and the screen for the door at the entrance of the tabernacle, the altar of burnt offering with its bronze grating, its poles, all its utensils, and the laver in its base, the hangings of the court, its pillars, their sockets, and the screen for the gate of the court, the pegs of the tabernacle, the pegs of the court, and their cords, the garments of ministry for ministering in the holy place, the holy garments for Aaron the priest, and the garments of his sons to minister as priests. All right, now, so I read the whole list because I want you to see that there's all kinds of stuff that's involved in giving. Right? And what does Paul tell us in 1 Corinthians? That God loves a cheerful giver. And where did he get that idea? Well, I'm going to guess that he probably got it from right here. Whoever is of a willing heart, right? Willing. You want to do this. You're not being forced. There's no obligation. No one's twisting your arm, but you want to do this, right? And so this is where this idea stems from. Is whatever you're going to give, whether it's gold, silver, or bronze, essentially money, or of its any other kind of resource, we went through that, scarlet thread and all these other things, or if you're giving your service, right? Notice there, did you see the service, right? All these things that you're going to make, uh, you know, you're good at something and you're going to give your time, do so out of a cheerful heart, a willing heart, a voluntary heart. No one's putting a gun to your head to make you do this. God certainly is not putting a gun to your head to make you do this. Now, what does it say? And all the congregation of the children of Israel departed from the presence of Moses, and everyone came whose heart was stirred, and everyone whose spirit was willing, and they brought the Lord's offering for the work of the tabernacle and meeting, and for all its service, and for the holy garments. They came, both men and women, as many as had a willing heart, and brought earrings and nose rings, rings, necklaces, all jewelry of gold. That is, every man who made an offering of gold to the Lord. And every man with whom was found blue, purple, scarlet thread, fine linen, goat's hairs, all this stuff, right? And they brought it to him. Everyone who offered an offering of silver or bronze brought the Lord's offering. And everyone with whom was found acacia wood for any work of the service brought it. All the women who were gifted artisans spun yarn with their hands and brought what they had spun of blue, purple, and scarlet and fine linen. So I want you to understand, when you give to God, it doesn't only have to be dollars and cents or any kind of money. Now, sometimes you might hear that. You got to throw $100 in the plate or $1,000, and then God's going to bless you. That's not true, right? Now, if you want to give that way, you can. But you can give in so many other ways. You can give of your time. You can give of your service. You can give of your talents. Maybe you have resources. Maybe you have some land that's full of firewood, and you can donate some firewood to somebody. You even put it in the back of your pickup truck, and you take it over there, and you give it to that person. Did you give them did you give them cash? No, but you gave them, something very valuable. Maybe somebody that really needs that firewood, and, so you save them the price of the wood and then also the transportation of it, and you showed up with a big smile on your face because you're like, "Man, this is so exciting, I get to do this," and then you bless them with that as well, right? And that's wonderful. Now, if you're on the receiving end of this, you need to hear something. It's good to be a cheerful giver, but it's also good to be a cheerful receiver, right? Because if you say, "Oh, I can't accept that. There's no way I can," well, then your pride is getting in the way. If somebody wants to give you, you know, then cheerfully receive it and say thank you, right? And then you will have a chance to give to someone else, right? That's what makes this so much fun. Is that we give, right? One person gives, and then the next person gives, and then the next person gives, and around and round it goes. That keeps it really exciting, right? So that's how we do this whole thing. Is one gives, and then another gives, and then another gives, and it keeps it a lot of fun. All right. And Moses said to the children of Israel, "See, the Lord is called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and he has filled him with the Spirit of God, in wisdom and understanding and knowledge and all manner of workmanship, to design artistic works, to work in gold and silver and bronze, and cutting jewels for setting and carving wood, and to work in all manner of artistic workmanship. And he's put in his heart the ability to teach in him and Aholiab, the son of Ahasamach, of the tribe of Dan. He has filled them with skill to do all manner of work of the engraver and the designer and the tapestry maker in blue, purple, and scarlet thread and fine linen, and of the weaver, those who do work, every work, and those who do artistic works." Right. So again, so many different ways that you can give, and God is blessed. People are blessed when we give in all these different ways. Right. So it really is fun, and it should be easy, and it should be fun. Right. Let me just say that word again. Fun. When you give, it should be fun. If you're giving and it's not fun, then you probably should stop until it becomes fun again. And how do you say, well, how much am I really supposed to give? Give until you start feeling like, I don't really want to give anymore because it's not fun anymore. Now, there may be times in your life you say, you know what? I've been kind of stingy most of my life. I've given barely 1%. I want to see if I can cheerfully give 5%. Right? And try that. Now, the first time you do it, you might say, but then the next time you're like, you know what, this isn't so bad. I actually like giving that 5%. Or, ramp up slowly. And then you can get to 10%. And then you can start to really push yourself with your faith. Maybe I should give even more. Right? Maybe I should give more of myself. Now, be careful what you're doing, okay? If you have the gift of gab, that may not always be something that's really needed. Okay, so be careful, right? They didn't need everything. They didn't need people that could just talk in the tabernacle. They needed people that could build the tabernacle, right? So keep that in mind if you're going to be giving. Make sure what you're giving is something that is needed. Not just think, well, I'm so good at this, I'm going to do this, right? Um, it may not be necessary. So check yourself. And Bezalel and Aholiab and every gifted artisan in whom the Lord had put wisdom and understanding to know how to do all manner of work for the service of the sanctuary shall do according to all the Lord has commanded. Then Moses called Bezalel and Aholiab and every gifted artisan in whose heart the Lord had put wisdom, everyone whose heart was stirred to come and do the work. And they received from Moses all the offering which the children of Israel had brought for the work of the service of making the sanctuary. So they continued bringing to him freewill offerings every morning. And all the craftsmen who were doing all the work of the sanctuary came, each from the work he was doing. And they spoke to Moses, saying, the people bring much more than enough for the service of the work which the Lord has commanded us to do. So Moses gave a commandment, and they caused it to be proclaimed throughout the camp, saying, let neither man nor woman do any more work for the offering of the sanctuary. And the people were restrained from bringing, for the material they had was sufficient for all the work to be done, indeed, too much, right? So again, the people were so happy to give that they had too much. And after a while, it's like, you know what? We don't need any more badger skin. I'm sorry, we don't need more gold. Right now, if you are a leader, maybe of a congregation, you're the leader of a home fellowship, or you're the leader of your family, there's a time when you just like, I don't need more. Okay. Now, that's not really our human instinct because we often go, well, I just need just a little bit more, just a little bit more. Right. But when we understand who is the giver, God is the giver. He's the supplier. And once we have that relationship figured out, then we're going to be less inclined. I say less because probably none of us is perfect, but we're going to be less inclined to say, I need to have this stuff and you got to hold on to this stuff just in case, you know? Well, look, if you're going to need more in the future, guess what? God will raise up more in the future. And when you can really get to that place and believe that and trust in that and rely upon that and rest in that, man, life goes a whole lot easier. Now, I'm not saying I've arrived, okay? I'm getting there. I'm getting there, but I haven't exactly arrived, right? But I know when those times that I'm just, I feel the peace, I feel the goodness of God. I'm just relaxed. I'm like, you know what? This is good. And then I don't stress. I love it. I wish every day could be like that, right? I know God's going to get me there eventually, but I'm working it. Okay, so there's also time to say we have enough. And all the gifted artisans among them who worked on the tabernacle made 10 curtains woven with fine linen and blue, purple, and scarlet thread with artistic designs. Of cherubim they made them. The length of each curtain was 28 cubits, and the width of each curtain 4 cubits. The curtains were all the same. And he coupled 5 curtains to one another, and the other 5 curtains he coupled to one another. He made loops of blue yarn on the edge of the curtain on the selvage of one set. Likewise, he did on the outer edge of the other curtain on the second set. 50 loops he made on one curtain, 50 loops he made on the edge of the curtain on the edge of the second set. The loops were one curtain together. And he made 50 clasps of gold and coupled the curtains to one another with the clasps, and it might be one tabernacle. He made curtains of goat's hair for the tent over the tabernacle. He made 11 curtains. The length of each curtain was 30 cubits, and the width of each curtain was 4 cubits. 11 curtains were the same size. He coupled 5 curtains by themselves and 6 curtains by themselves. He made 50 loops on the edge of the curtain, and as the outermost one set, 50 loops he made on the edge of the curtain of the second set. Now, I don't have really a lot to comment about this. As I understand it, this is sort of an ingredients list, and these are the ingredients. We're reading the ingredients, and I don't know that there's necessarily anything magical or spiritual about these. Now there could be, and maybe I'm missing it completely. Don't you see it? Right now, I've read some of those type of commentaries, and I'm always a little bit skeptical because, like, how do you know what 50 stands for something, right? Or why there's 4 loops or 5 loops, and why there are 5 instead of 6. Sometimes I wonder if it's just practicality. I think that could be. Now, again, there could be something that I'm missing here in the text, and that's what makes it exciting. Is because the next time we go through it, like, oh my goodness, did you know? But I would just caution you, caution myself, and I caution others. Say, if you're going to come up with an interpretation, make sure you can prove that from the text, right? If you're just saying, well, I think it's kind of interesting and it seems to me, be careful, right? We want to make sure that we can prove things from the text or at least have a pretty good basis that we're finding in the text itself. right? Because if we're going to say this is that, well, then we need to have some type of authority to say that. If we're just saying, well, this is kind of what I think, well, then that's what your opinion. But just be careful. All right, for the tabernacle, he made boards of acacia wood standing upright. The length of each board was 10 cubits, and the width of each board a cubit and a half. Each board had two tenons for binding one to another. Thus he made all the boards of the tabernacle. He made the boards of the tabernacle 20 boards on the south side, 40 sockets of silver he made to go under the 20 boards, two sockets under each of the boards, for two, it has two tenons. And for the other side of the tabernacle, the north side, he made 20 boards, and then 40 sockets of silver, two sockets under each of the boards. The west side of the tabernacle made six boards. He also made two boards for the two back corners of the tabernacle, and they were coupled at the bottom and coupled together at the top by one ring. Thus he made them for the two corners. So there were eight boards and their sockets, 16 sockets of silver, two sockets under each of the boards. Now, all of this, right, very specific detail, right, and what was the purpose of this tent that they were making? It's pretty simple. So that God's presence could dwell there. Now, isn't it interesting that this tabernacle was made of animal skin? Hmm. Well, I recall that it says that the word, the logos, the var, it also became flesh and it tabernacled among us. The difference is that the first time the presence of God tabernacled in animal skin. The second time it tabernacled in human skin. Isn't that amazing, right? I mean, wow, that's kind of cool, right? So certainly the human body is much more intricate than this building that they're making, right? And we could go through all the different bones and all this different stuff, which is not necessarily important to us at this point, of course, right? So this just gives us again another huge, really exciting perspective on this this tabernacle, right? So again, it's kind of an ingredients list. It's not my favorite passage because it is a bit of an ingredients list, but when we kind of dig in a little bit deeper and say, "Oh my goodness, do you see the parallel between the tabernacle and Jesus tabernacle?" Right? One, the tabernacle was in animal skin. Jesus tabernacled in human skin. That is pretty amazing. And that's one more reason that Jesus is God, right? Who was in the tabernacle in the wilderness? That was God. That was God's presence. Who's Jesus? Emmanuel, God with us, right? There it is. These parallels are beautiful. Then Bezalel made the ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits in its length, a cubit and a half its width, and a cubit and a half its height. He overlaid it with pure gold inside and outside and made a molding all around it. And he cast for it 4 rings of gold to be set in its 4 corners, 2 rings on one side and 2 rings on the other side. Okay, and so we go on with all these beautiful things. He also made the mercy seat of pure gold, 2.5 cubits was its length, and a cubit and a half its width. He made 2 cherubim of beaten gold. He made them of one piece at the 2 ends of the mercy seat. So again, this is a picture of the heavenly realm. Right? This is a picture of what is actually happening. Now, let's go to Isaiah chapter 6. We'll go there, then we'll go to Revelation chapter 4. Near the king Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above it stood seraphim, each one had 6 wings. Right? So here we have these cherubim who are crying, "Holy, holy, holy, kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot." Right? So this is what we just saw in Exodus. Right? So you have this mercy seat, the presence, this glorious presence of God would be hovering or dwelling there somehow. And then you have these two cherubim made of acacia wood covered with gold that are facing this, right? And it says, above it stood the seraphim. Okay, so above the presence of God. So kind of imagine here. I'll make me a little bigger so you can kind of see that just a bit better. All right. So you have this presence of God, and then above that are the cherubim. That's where they're essentially standing or sitting. Okay, so that's again the picture that we have here in the tabernacle. I love it. It's so cool. Now let's get back to the text. So, and of course, remember that Satan, right? He was also the anointed cherub who covers covering the presence of God. It seems that he might have been actually above the presence of God. It's hard to imagine, but that's what the text says. Anyway, we move on. Let's go to Revelation chapter 4, because there we have a very similar picture. And we have one on the throne, and then one who sat on there was like a jasper and a sardius stone in appearance, and there was a rainbow around the throne in appearance like an emerald. Around the throne were 24 thrones, and the thrones I saw 24 elders. All right, and then we before the throne with glass, and you got these four living creatures full of eyes in front and back. The first living creature, right? These are the cherubim, right? And they're saying, "Holy, holy, holy." Right. So again, this is the heavenly courtroom that we're seeing, where the presence of God truly was. All right, he made the cherubim of beaten gold. He made them of one piece at the two ends of the mercy seat, one cherub at one end on this side, and the other cherub at that other end on that side. He made the cherubim at the two ends of one piece of the mercy seat. The cherubim spread out their wings above and covered the mercy seat with their wings. They faced one another. The feet of the cherubim were toward the mercy seat. Now, what's interesting is we know that the cherubim have four faces, right? So, which face? Uh, I'm gonna guess it was the human face. It's just a wild guess, but these are beings that have four different faces. Now, maybe it's possible that they don't have a square head with four faces, but maybe they have four faces, and maybe they're able to present one of those faces at different times. I don't know. That is pure speculation on my part, right? So just keep that in mind. But I kind of get the impression. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. And he overlaid it with pure gold and made a molding of gold all around it. He also made a frame of a handbreadth all around it, and made a molding of gold for the frame all around it, and cast for it four rings of gold, and put the rings of the four corners that were on its legs. The rings were close to the frame as holders for the poles to bear the table. And he made the poles of acacia wood to bear the table, and overlaid them with gold. He made of pure gold the utensils which were on the table, as dishes, as cups, as bowls, and as pitchers for pouring. He also made the lampstand of pure gold of hammered work, made the lampstand its shaft, its branches of gold. Its ornamental knobs and its flowers were of the same piece. 6 branches came out of its sides, 3 branches of the lampstand out of one side, and 3 branches of the lampstand out of the other side. Now remember, the presence of God is in this place. Now you have this 7 candelabra, right? A menorah, right? Who else was in the midst of a menorah? Yeshua, in the book of Revelation, chapter 1, right? It says he sees these 7 candlesticks, and Jesus is in the midst of them. Right? So instead of 7 different candlesticks, it's a uh, 7 candle lampstand, or a menorah, and Yeshua was somehow in the midst of that. Now, we're looking at right up here. Let's see if I can. There we go. Oh, right there, right? So this is our symbol for the way congregation. Okay, it's a menorah, right? And you can see that some people ask, "Are those letters in there?" Yes. There's a yud, there is a shin, there's a vav, and there's an ayin. Okay, going from sorry, so yud, shin, vav, ayin. I have to go backwards. Okay, it's all mirror image. So that is Yeshua. He's in the midst of the menorah, right? So that's our interpretation of kind of what it looks like, right? I don't know what it looked like when Jesus was actually there in the midst of the candlestick. Right? Kind of cool stuff. But that's our interpretation at the Way Congregation. All right, so here we have, go back to the text. All right, and 6 branches came out of its sides, 3 branches of the lampstand out of one side, and 3 branches of the lampstand out of the other side. There were 3 bowls made like almond blossoms on one branch, with an ornamental knob and a flower, and 3 bowls made like almond blossoms on the other branch, with an ornamental knob and a flower, and some for the 6 branches coming out of the lamp. And on the lampstand itself were 4 bowls made like almond blossoms, each with its ornamental knob and flower. There was a knob under the first 2 branches of the same, a knob under the second 2 branches of the same, and a knob under the third 2 branches of the same, according to the 6 branches extending from it. Their knobs and their branches were of one piece. All of it was hammered piece of pure gold. Now this is beautiful, right? You have, what do you have? You got 7, but then you have 3 pairs, right? You can see that there are 3 pairs, right? Because the 2 branches are paired up, right? And then those lead to a, um, these are leading here to almond blossoms, right? I don't know, it's kind of beautiful that there's a something fruitful there, right? When 2 get together, the fruit is produced, right? I mean, God put so many details in here, and we're probably just scratching the surface. And he made it 7 lamps, its wick trimmers, and its trays of pure gold, of talent of pure gold. He made it with all its utensils. He made the incense altar of acacia wood. Its length was a cubit, and its width a cubit. It was square, and its 2 cubits was its height. Its horns were of one piece with it, and he overlaid it with pure gold at top, its sides, all around. And its horns he also made for a molding of gold all around it. He made 2 rings of gold for it under its molding, by its 2 corners, on both sides, as holders for the poles with which to bear it. And he made the poles of acacia wood, and overlaid them with gold. He also made the anointing oil and the pure incense of sweet spices, according to the work of the perfumer. All right, chapter 38. He made the altar of burnt offering. Acacia wood, 5 cubits was its length, and 5 cubits its width. It was square, and its height was 3 cubits. He made its horn of its 4 corners. The horns of it were one piece with it, and he overlaid it with bronze. He made all the utensils for the altar, the pans, the shovels, the basins, the forks, and these fire pans. All its utensils were made of bronze. Right? So again, the closer we are to the manifest presence of God, the greater quality of the metal, right? The pure, right? So we use gold, and then as we get further away, we go to silver, and then we go to bronze, further away from the presence of God. He cast 4 rings of the 4 corners of bronze grating as holders for the poles, and he made the poles of acacia wood and overlaid them with bronze. Then he put the poles into the rings of the sides of the altar with which to bear it. He made the altar hollow with boards. He made the laver of bronze and its base of bronze from the bronze mirrors of the serving women who assembled at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Then he made the court on the south side. The hangings of the court were of fine linen, well, 100 cubits long. There were 20 pillars for them, with 20 bronze sockets. The hooks of the pillars and their bands were silver. On the north side were hangings of 100 cubits long and 20 pillars and their 20 bronze sockets. The hooks of the pillars and their bands were silver. On the west side there were hangings of 50 cubits, with 10 pillars and their 10 sockets. The hooks of the pillars and the bands were silver. For the east side, the hangings were 50 cubits. The hangings of one side of the gate were 15 cubits long, with their 3 pillars and their 3 sockets. And the same for the other side of the court gate on this side and that were hangings of 15 cubits, and with their 3 pillars and their 3 sockets. All the hangings of the court all around were of fine woven linen. The sockets of the pillars were bronze, the hooks of the pillars and their bands were silver, and the overlay of their capitals were silver, and all the pillars of the court had bands of silver. The screen for the gate of the court was woven of blue, purple, and scarlet thread and of fine woven linen. The length was 20 cubits, and its height along its width was 5 cubits, corresponding to the hangings of the court. And there were 4 pillars with their 4 sockets of bronze, their hooks, their silver, and the overlay of their capitals and their bands was silver. All the pegs of the tabernacle and of the court all around were bronze. Okay, so that's the end of today's portion. Now, again, there's a lot in there. I know it kind of felt like a list, right? Well, it kind of was a list. But here's the takeaway, guys. This is important. What is the takeaway? God wanted to dwell with us. Now, think about that for a second. You ever feel really special when someone says, "Hey, uh, somebody important, okay, like somebody really important." Maybe this has never happened. I don't know. But, think of the most important person you can think of. Take a second, all right? I don't know, maybe it's the president, maybe it's the queen or the king, maybe it's a movie star or an athlete. Maybe it's your best friend from 10 years ago. Maybe it's your spouse. Maybe, I don't know. You think about it. Who is really, I don't mean just the most important to you, but who is kind of the somebody who has like a lot of stature. You'd just be blown away. You could think of that person. Maybe it's your favorite quarterback or something, or your favorite movie star. And let imagine if they called up and said, "Hey, I want to spend time with you." You're like, "What? You want to spend time with me? That's amazing." Well, this is God, clearly the most important being that ever was and ever will be, because He's the maker of heaven and earth. And He says, "You know what, Doug, I want to spend time with you. You do? Yes, I do. But for me to hang out with you, we kinda need to do a few things, because if I come hang out with you as I am, boom, you're gone, right? You just turned to dust. So we've gotta take some precautions. We're gonna create this thing called a tabernacle, and that will allow me to then hang out with you. Wow, pretty amazing, right? So this goes on now for some 1,400 years, and then God decides that He's going to actually come and be one of us, so that He can hang out with me and can hang out with you. What's the whole purpose? The purpose of this is so that we can be transformed, so that we can have bodies that will once again be able to be in His presence as He is, right? The tabernacle is a very temporary measure. That's why there's no tabernacle in the New Jerusalem in the age to come. There is right now. Well, how do you know that, Doug? Well, I showed you already, right? I showed you in Isaiah chapter 6, and I showed you in Revelation chapter 4. Those are both in the tabernacle of God. And if you look in Revelation, you'll see it in chapter 3 that there's a tabernacle. You'll see it, or a temple. You'll see it in chapter 15, there is, and then you'll see in 21, it says that I didn't see a temple in there, because there was, and then there won't be, right? The whole point is to fix us, to fix our corruption problem, our degeneration problem, our falling apart problem, and that is what God did through the cross, right? So, pretty exciting stuff. And of course, the promise that we have is the resurrection. So the tabernacle is a very temporary measure. And that is so that God can still be with us, because He's like, you know what? I just can't wait all these thousands of years to be with you. And when you put it in that perspective, it kind of blows your mind. Wait, the God of the whole universe wants to be with me? The God of the whole universe loves me? Wait, Jesus is God and He came in the flesh to be with me so that I could be with Him? Yeah, isn't that amazing? Right. So again, I know that this week's portion a little bit tedious for things. I don't exactly enjoy reading a recipe for how you make a tabernacle. Okay, it's a parts list. Okay, it's not as exciting as reading, a book on parts that might go in your car. Right? There's a carburetor and there's a converter and all these powertrain things, and you're like, okay, yeah, yes. Necessary, but not exactly exciting reading. But when we think, okay, all this is so we can make this really amazing car, then it becomes a different proposition altogether, right? So we got through that. There's more good stuff to come in this book. Then we'll be starting Leviticus. Then we have the instructions on, well, how do we work in this thing that you just created for us? But there's far more than that in the book of Revelation. Again, some of it gets a bit tedious, okay? Then we get to the book of Numbers, okay? And that's a little more, a little juicier, right? But there's great stuff in the book of Leviticus as well. And you know what we find in the book of Leviticus? That you shall love your neighbor as yourself, right? So that's at the heart of all of this stuff is about love. Love God, love your neighbor. Why should you love God? Because He loves you. Why should you love your neighbor? Because if you love God, you kind of have to love your neighbor. It's how it works, okay? But first love God, and that love that you have for Him, and you experience His love, that's going to flow over into your love for your neighbor. All right, well, thank you guys for joining me. So glad you did. If you haven't signed up to go with us to Israel, you need to do that. It's going to be fantastic. Go to thewaycongregation.com. Also, if you want to join us for our time celebrating Passover this year, please do that. And go to the Way Congregation. There's a button there. It says Passover. Check it out, and we hope that you will join us this year. Until next time, God bless you. Do join us tomorrow night for Prophecy Roundtable.